In the small town of Willow Creek, life moved at a slow and predictable pace. The streets were lined with old oak trees, and everyone seemed to know each other's business. It was the kind of place where people waved as they passed by on the road and kids rode their bikes freely without fear. For 9-year-old Maya, this little town was her entire world. She loved everything about it: the friendly neighbors, the quiet parks, and especially her school. Maya was a bright, cheerful girl who always found joy in the simplest things. Her favorite part of herself? Her thick, curly hair. It wasn't just hair to her. It was a piece of her identity, something she took pride in. Every morning, her mom would braid it into intricate patterns, sometimes adding colorful beads or ribbons to make it even more special. At recess, her friends often asked her how her mom managed to create such beautiful styles. Maya would grin proudly and say, "My mom is magic." But lately, things hadn't been so magical for Maya. Something, or rather someone, was making school feel less like a safe haven and more like a place she dreaded going to. That someone was her 4th-grade teacher, Mrs. Harper. At first glance, Mrs. Harper seemed harmless enough. She wore glasses that made her look strict but fair, and she always dressed neatly in blazers and skirts. But beneath that polished exterior lay a coldness that Maya couldn't quite put her finger on. It started with small things. Mrs. Harper would call out Maya for raising her hand too eagerly during lessons, saying, "There's no need to shout, dear." When Maya laughed loudly while playing a game with her classmates, Mrs. Harper scolded her, claiming she was being disruptive. Even when Maya turned in assignments, there was always some criticism. Her handwriting wasn't neat enough, or her answers weren't detailed enough. While other students received gentle corrections, Maya felt like she was under constant scrutiny. One day, after lunch, Mrs. Harper stopped Maya as she walked back to her desk. In front of the whole class, she pointed at Maya's braids and said, "Your hair looks messy today. You should really do something about it. It's distracting the other students." Maya froze, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Messy? Her mom had spent nearly an hour perfecting those braids that morning. They weren't messy, they were art. But instead of arguing, Maya nodded silently and sat down, trying to ignore the snickers from a few kids nearby. When Maya got home that evening, she burst into tears before she even took off her backpack. Her mom, a kind and strong woman named Angela, rushed to comfort her. Sitting together on the couch, Maya explained what had happened. Angela listened quietly, her heart breaking for her daughter. As a pediatrician, Angela had seen her share of struggles, both personal and professional. She knew racism when she saw it, and this felt like yet another example of it creeping into their lives. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Angela said softly, brushing a strand of hair away from Maya's face. "We'll figure this out together. No one gets to treat you like that, not your teacher, not anyone." Despite her reassurances, Angela couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in her chest. This wasn't just about one rude comment. It was about a pattern that needed to be addressed before it spiraled out of control. Little did she know the worst was yet to come, but so was her chance to stand up and fight back. That night, as Maya drifted off to sleep, Angela stayed awake, thinking about what to do next. She knew she had to protect her daughter, but she also wanted to teach her something important: that standing up for yourself doesn't mean you have to shrink. Sometimes it means growing bigger, stronger, and louder than ever before. And if anyone tried to bring Maya down, Angela would be right there beside her, ready to face whatever came their way. The next morning, as Maya got ready for school, Angela hugged her tightly and whispered, "No matter what happens today, remember who you are. Remember how amazing you are." Maya nodded, clutching her mom's hand for a moment longer than usual. Neither of them realized just how much those words would matter later that day. The next morning, Maya woke up with a heavy heart. She didn't want to go to school, but her mom encouraged her gently, reminding her that she was strong and brave. "We'll handle this together," Angela said, brushing Maya's hair into 2 neat braids, "just like we always do." Though Maya nodded, the knot in her stomach wouldn't go away. Something about today felt different, like the air was charged with tension she couldn't quite explain. When Maya walked into her classroom, she tried to keep her head high, just like her mom had taught her. But as soon as Mrs. Harper's eyes landed on her, Maya felt that familiar chill run down her spine. The teacher's lips pressed into a thin line, and without saying a word, she pointed at Maya's braids. "You didn't fix it," Mrs. Harper said sharply, loud enough for the entire class to hear. "I told you yesterday that your hair is distracting. It's still messy." Maya's cheeks flushed red and she looked down at her desk, unsure of what to say. Messy? Her mom had spent extra time making sure her braids were perfect this morning. How could they possibly be considered messy? Before she could respond, Mrs. Harper crossed the room and stood over her, arms folded. "If you can't follow the rules, then maybe I need to take matters into my own hands," the teacher said coldly. The class fell silent, all eyes turning toward Maya. Some kids shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others whispered behind cupped hands. Maya felt trapped, like a deer caught in headlights. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor and vanish. But before she could even think of a way to defend herself, Mrs. Harper grabbed her arm firmly and pulled her out of her seat. "Come with me," Mrs. Harper said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Maya stumbled after her, heart pounding, in her chest. They left the classroom and headed down the hallway, drawing curious stares from other students and teachers. Maya's mind raced. Where were they going? What was going to happen? Fear bubbled inside her, but she didn't dare speak. Up. Mrs. Harper's grip on her arm was firm, almost painful, and Maya knew better than to try pulling away. They ended up in the nurse's office, a small, sterile room with white walls and the faint smell of antiseptic. The school nurse looked up from her paperwork, surprised to see them. "What's going on?" she asked hesitantly, glancing between Maya and Mrs. Harper. "This child refuses to follow the dress code," Mrs. Harper snapped, pointing at Maya's braids. "Her hair is unacceptable, and since she won't fix it herself, I'm going to deal with it." The nurse frowned, clearly uncomfortable. "Are you sure that's necessary?" she asked cautiously. "Maybe we should call her parents first." "No," Mrs. Harper interrupted sharply. "There's no time for that. This has gone on long enough." With that, she reached for a pair of scissors sitting on the counter. Maya's breath hitched in her throat as she realized what was about to happen. Panic surged through her and she instinctively raised her hands to protect her hair. "Please don't," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "My mom did these for me." But Mrs. Harper ignored her protests. Grabbing a fistful of Maya's braids, she began cutting them, off one by one. Each snip of the scissors felt like a knife slicing through Maya's soul. Tears streamed down her face as chunks of her beautiful braids fell to the floor. The nurse watched helplessly, unsure of how to intervene. By the time Mrs. Harper was done, Maya's head was uneven and patchy, her once proud hairstyle reduced to a tangled mess. And yet Mrs. Harper wasn't finished. "This isn't good enough," she muttered under her breath, shaking her head. She rummaged through a drawer and pulled out an electric shaver. Maya's eyes widened in horror. "No," she cried, trying to pull away. "Please stop." But Mrs. Harper didn't listen. She turned on the shaver and began running it over Maya's scalp, ignoring her sobs and pleas. Within minutes, Maya's head was completely shaved, her curls gone forever. The room felt suffocating, the hum of the shaver echoing in Maya's ears. When it was finally over, Mrs. Harper stepped back, examining her work with a satisfied nod. "There," she said coldly. "Now you won't distract anyone anymore." Maya sat frozen in the chair, too stunned to move. Her reflection in the mirror across the room showed a stranger staring back at her, a bald little girl with tear-streaked cheeks and wide, frightened eyes. She couldn't believe this was real. This couldn't be happening. But as the reality sank in, a deep sense of shame and humiliation washed over her. All she wanted was to run home, to hide under the covers and never come out. Mrs. Harper handed Maya a tissue and told her to clean herself up. "You can go back to class now," she said dismissively, as if nothing significant had occurred. The nurse, still looking uneasy, offered Maya a weak smile and murmured something about calling her parents. But Maya barely heard her. Her legs felt like jelly as she stood up and shuffled out of the room, clutching the tissue tightly in her hand. When she returned to the classroom, the whispers started immediately. Some kids stared openly, while others giggled behind their hands. Maya kept her gaze fixed on the floor, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. She felt exposed, vulnerable, like everyone could see right through her. Mrs. Harper acted as though nothing unusual had happened, continuing the lesson as if shaving a child's head mid-class was perfectly normal behavior. By the time the final bell rang, Maya was emotionally drained. She didn't say a word to anyone as she packed up her things and headed for the bus. The ride home felt endless, each bump in the road jolting her already fragile state. When she finally walked through the front door, her dad noticed right away that something was wrong. His daughter's usual bright smile was replaced by a look of devastation, and her shiny braids were nowhere to be seen. "What happened to your hair?" he asked softly, crouching down to her level. Maya burst into tears, unable to hold it in any longer. Between sobs, she recounted the horrifying events of the day: the cutting, the shaving, the humiliation. Her father listened in stunned silence, his jaw tightening with anger. He hugged her close, promising that everything would be okay, but inside he was seething. No one treated his little girl like that. Not ever. He called Angela immediately, filling her in on the details. As Angela listened, her blood boiled. She had suspected Mrs. Harper was difficult, but this was beyond comprehension. Without hesitation, she left work early, determined to confront the woman who had dared to harm her child. On the drive to the school, Angela replayed Maya's story in her mind, her thoughts swirling with both fury and determination. Someone needed to stand up for Maya, and Angela was ready to make sure justice was served. Angela's car screeched to a halt in the school parking lot, her mind racing faster than her heartbeat. She barely remembered the drive over, her thoughts consumed by flashes of Maya's tear-streaked face and the horrifying story her husband had recounted. Every fiber of her being screamed for justice, but Angela forced herself to stay calm, at least on the surface. Inside, she was a storm of emotions: anger, disbelief, and an unshakable need to protect her daughter. As she strode toward the school entrance, her heels clicked sharply against the pavement, each step echoing her determination. The receptionist at the front desk looked up, startled by Angela's presence. "Can I help you?" she asked nervously, clearly sensing the intensity radiating from the woman standing before her. "I'm here to speak with Mrs. Harper," Angela said, her voice steady but firm. "And the principal. Immediately." The receptionist hesitated, glancing at the clock. School had been out for hours, but teachers often stayed late grading papers or preparing lessons. "Let me check if they're available," she murmured, picking up the phone. After a brief conversation, she hung up and turned back to Angela. "Mrs. Harper is still here, and the principal will meet you shortly. Please wait in his office." Angela nodded curtly, her jaw clenched. Waiting wasn't something she did. Well, especially not now, but she knew patience would serve her better in this moment. As she followed the receptionist down the hallway, her eyes scanned the familiar surroundings. This building had once felt safe, a place where Maya learned, laughed, and grew. Now it felt tainted, like a shadow had fallen over its walls. When Angela entered the principal's office, he was already seated behind his desk, looking uneasy. Mr. Thompson was a tall man with thinning gray hair and glasses that always seemed slightly crooked. He stood as she walked in, offering a weak smile. "Dr. Davis Johnson, thank you for coming," he began, gesturing for her to sit. "I understand there's been an incident involving Maya." "Incident?" Angela repeated, her tone icy. She didn't bother sitting. Instead, she planted her hands firmly on the desk, leaning forward until their faces were inches apart. "My 9-year-old daughter came home today with her head shaved because your teacher decided my child's hair was distracting. That's not an incident. It's an outrage." Mr. Thompson flinched visibly, stammering as he tried to respond. I assure you we take these matters very seriously. I plan to investigate thoroughly." "Investigate?" Angela cut him off. her voice rising slightly. "There's nothing to investigate. My daughter told me exactly what happened. And unless Mrs. Harper has suddenly developed amnesia, she won't deny it either. What I want to know is why no one stopped her. Why did a grown adult think it was acceptable to humiliate a child in such a cruel way?" Before Mr. Thompson could answer, the door opened, and Mrs. Harper stepped inside. Her usual air of authority seemed to falter the moment she saw Angela. For the first time, her polished exterior cracked, revealing a flicker of unease beneath. "Dr. Davis Johnson," she said stiffly, avoiding eye contact. "I assume you're here about Maya." "You assume correctly," Angela replied, turning to face her. Her gaze was piercing, unwavering. "Care to explain why you thought it was appropriate to shave my daughter's head without my permission? Or hers?" Mrs. Harper straightened, her posture attempting to regain some semblance of control. "It was a matter of enforcing school policy," she said defensively. "Maya's hair was untidy and disruptive. When she refused to comply, I had no choice but to intervene." "No choice?" Angela repeated, incredulous. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "Are you telling me that cutting off a child's hair and then shaving her head is standard practice in this school? Because if it is, I'll be taking this issue far beyond these walls." Mrs. Harper's face flushed red, whether from embarrassment or anger. Angela couldn't tell. "I was merely trying to maintain order in my classroom," the teacher insisted. "If parents would ensure their children follow the rules, situations like this wouldn't arise." Angela stared at her, disbelief etched across her features. "Order? You call humiliating a child maintaining order? Let me make one thing crystal clear. Maya's hair is not a distraction. It's a part of who she is, a part of her culture, her identity. And what you did today wasn't discipline, it was abuse." The room fell silent, the weight of Angela's words hanging heavy in the air. Mr. Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly unsure how to navigate the escalating tension. Finally, he cleared his throat and spoke up. "Mrs. Harper, perhaps it would be best if you stepped outside while Dr. Davis Johnson and I discuss next steps." For a moment, Mrs. Harper looked like she might protest, but something in Angela's steely gaze silenced her. Without another word, she turned and left the room, closing the door softly behind her. Angela exhaled deeply, though her fury hadn't subsided. Turning back to Mr. Thompson, she fixed him with a pointed look. "This isn't just about Maya," she said. "It's about every child who walks through those doors. If this school can't provide a safe and respectful environment for all students, then changes need to happen. And they need to happen now." Mr. Thompson nodded hastily, fumbling for his pen. "Of course, Dr. Davis Johnson. I'll launch a full investigation immediately and ensure that appropriate action is taken. In the meantime, please know that we value your concerns deeply." Angela studied him for a long moment, searching for sincerity in his expression. Satisfied, for now, that he understood the gravity of the situation, she gave a curt nod. "Good, because if I don't see real change, I won't hesitate to escalate this further." With that, she turned on her heel and marched out of the office, leaving Mr. Thompson pale and sweating in her wake. As Angela drove home, her mind raced with plans. She knew this wasn't just about punishing Mrs. Harper. It was about protecting other children from experiencing the same pain Maya had endured. Education, advocacy, accountability, these were the tools she intended to wield. And if anyone doubted her resolve, they would soon learn just how far a mother would go to fight for her child. The next morning, Angela woke up with a sense of purpose that burned brighter than ever before. She had spent the night thinking about Maya, about the pain her daughter must have felt sitting in that classroom with her head shaved, and about how many other children might be suffering silently under similar circumstances. This wasn't just about one teacher's actions, it was about a system that allowed such cruelty to happen. And Angela was determined to shine a light on it. Before heading to work, she sat down with Maya over breakfast. Her daughter looked small and fragile, hunched over her bowl of cereal, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes when Angela placed a notepad on the table. "Maya," Angela began gently, I want you to tell me everything that happened. Again, every detail, no matter how small. Can you do that for me? Maya hesitated, picking at her food with the spoon. Talking about it brought back all the hurt and embarrassment, but she also trusted her mom completely. Slowly, she nodded. As Maya recounted the events, Angela jotted down notes, asking follow-up questions whenever something seemed unclear. By the time they were done, Angela had a detailed account of what had transpired, written in her own words alongside Maya's recollections. "Why are you writing it down?" Maya asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because we're going to make sure this never happens to anyone else," Angela replied, reaching across the table to take her daughter's hand. "You're brave, sweetheart. And what happened to you is wrong. We're going to fight for justice, not just for you, but for every kid who deserves to feel safe at school." Maya didn't fully understand what her mom meant by fighting for justice, but she felt a tiny spark of hope ignite within her. Maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Later that day, Angela called an emergency meeting with Mr. Thompson, the principal. She requested that Mrs. Harper be present as well, along with a representative from the school board. To Angela's relief, her demand was met without resistance, likely because word of the incident had already begun spreading through the community. Parents were talking, teachers were whispering, and even some students had started posting about it online. The pressure was mounting, and everyone involved knew it. When Angela arrived at the school, she carried herself with quiet confidence. Gone was the raw anger she'd shown the previous day. Instead, she radiated calm determination. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about accountability. She walked into the conference room where the meeting was being held, greeted only by tense silence. Mr. Thompson sat at the head of the table, fidgeting with his pen. Mrs. Harper sat stiffly beside him, her face pale and drawn. Across from them was a middle-aged woman representing the school board, her expression unreadable. Angela took her seat without hesitation, placing her notepad on the table in front of her. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said evenly, looking each person in the eye. "What happened to my daughter is unacceptable, and I'm here to ensure that steps are taken to prevent anything like this from happening again." Mr. Thompson cleared his throat nervously. "Dr. Davis Johnson, let me reiterate that we take this matter very seriously. Mrs. Harper has agreed to cooperate fully with our investigation." "That's not enough," Angela interrupted, her tone firm but controlled. "An investigation isn't going to fix the damage that's already been done. What we need are concrete actions, policies that protect students' rights, training programs for staff to address biases they may not even realize they have, and consequences for those who abuse their power." Mrs. Harper shifted uncomfortably in her chair, avoiding Angela's gaze. For the first time, she seemed genuinely unsure of herself, her usual air of authority crumbling under the weight of Angela's words. Angela continued, her voice steady and commanding. "Let's start with the facts. My daughter's hair was cut off without consent. Her head was shaved in front of witnesses. That's not discipline, that's humiliation, it's dehumanizing. And it sends a message to every student in this school that their culture, their identity doesn't matter." The school board representative leaned forward slightly, nodding thoughtfully. "I agree that this situation requires immediate attention," she said. "We'll review the school's policies and procedures to identify areas for improvement, but I also think it's important to hear Mrs. Harper's perspective. Perhaps she can explain her reasoning behind these actions." Angela turned to face Mrs. Harper, her expression unyielding. "Go ahead," she said coolly. "Explain yourself." Mrs. Harper swallowed hard, visibly struggling to find the right words. I believed I was maintaining order in my classroom," she stammered. "The dress code exists for a reason, and when Maya refused to comply, I felt I had no choice but to act." "No choice?" Angela repeated, leaning forward. "You had plenty of choices. You could have spoken to me or my husband. You could have consulted with your colleagues or the administration. Instead, you chose to humiliate a child. Do you have any idea how much harm you've caused? How deeply this has affected Maya?" Mrs. Harper opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again, lowering her head in shame. For the first time, she seemed to grasp the gravity of her actions, or at least the public backlash they had sparked. The school board representative sighed heavily, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "This is clearly a failure on multiple levels," she admitted. "Not only did a student suffer emotional trauma, but it reflects poorly on our entire district. Immediate action is necessary to restore trust and ensure accountability." By the end of the meeting, several decisions had been made. Mrs. Harper was placed on administrative leave pending further review, and the school board promised to implement mandatory diversity and inclusion training for all faculty members. Additionally, a new policy was proposed to explicitly prohibit discriminatory practices related to students' appearances, including hairstyles. As Angela left the school that evening, she felt a mix of emotions: relief that progress was being made, but also sadness for Maya, who had endured so much pain. Still, she reminded herself of the bigger picture. This wasn't just about one child or one teacher. It was about creating a safer, more inclusive environment for everyone. When she got home, Maya was sitting on the couch drawing pictures in a sketchbook. Angela sat down beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" she asked gently. Maya shrugged, though a faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Okay, I guess. Did you fix it?" Angela kissed the top of her head. "We're working on it," she said. "And we won't stop until it's fixed, for you, and for every kid who deserves to feel proud of who they are." Maya rested her head against her mom's shoulder, finding comfort in her strength. Together they would keep fighting, not just for themselves, but for a future where no child had to suffer the way she had. The days that followed the meeting at the school felt like a whirlwind for Angela and Maya. News of what had happened spread quickly throughout Willow Creek, sparking conversations in homes, coffee shops, and even grocery store aisles. Parents began sharing stories of their own children's struggles with teachers or school policies that seemed unfair. Some recalled instances where kids were teased for wearing traditional hairstyles or told to tone down their cultural expressions. Others admitted they'd stayed silent out of fear of rocking the boat, but now seeing Angela stand up so boldly, they felt inspired to speak out too. Angela didn't waste any time capitalizing on this momentum. She started organizing informal gatherings at her house, inviting parents, educators, and community leaders to come together and discuss ways to create real change. These meetings weren't just about venting frustrations. They were about finding solutions. Angela made sure everyone had a voice, encouraging quieter attendees to share their thoughts while gently challenging those who dismissed the issue as overblown. Her calm yet firm demeanor earned her respect, even from people who initially doubted her intentions. One evening during one of these gatherings, a local journalist named Rachel attended. She had heard whispers about the situation and wanted to learn more. After listening intently to the group's discussions, she approached Angela privately. "I think your story could inspire others," Rachel said earnestly. "Would you be willing to let me write an article about what happened? It could bring attention to the broader issue of discrimination in schools." At first, Angela hesitated. Sharing their private pain publicly wasn't something she took lightly. But then she thought about Maya, the way her daughter had clung to her after the incident, seeking reassurance that everything would be okay. If telling their story could help protect other children, how could she say no? With Maya's blessing, Angela agreed to the interview. The article appeared in the local newspaper a week later, accompanied by a photo of Angela and Maya sitting side by side on their porch. The headline read, "Mother Fights Back After Teacher. Shaves Daughter's Hair, a Call for Change in Our Schools." The piece detailed not only the shocking incident, but also the systemic issues it highlighted: racial bias, outdated dress codes, and the lack of accountability within educational institutions. Within hours of its publication, the story went viral, spreading far beyond Willow Creek. People across the country shared it on social media, praising Angela's courage and calling for reform in their own communities. The response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers offering support, sharing similar experiences, or simply thanking Angela for speaking up. Local news stations picked up the story, inviting Angela to appear on morning shows and talk programs. At first, she was nervous about stepping into the spotlight, but she reminded herself why she was doing this: for Maya, and for every child who deserved to feel safe and valued. During one televised interview, the host asked Angela directly, "What do you hope comes out of all this?" Angela paused, gathering her thoughts before answering. "I want people to understand that this isn't just about hair," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "It's about dignity. It's about recognizing that every child has the right to express themselves freely without fear of punishment or humiliation. And it's about holding adults accountable when they abuse their power. This is bigger than my family. It's about creating a world where no child feels ashamed of who they are." Her words resonated deeply, sparking petitions and protests in cities nationwide. Educators began reevaluating their classroom practices, while lawmakers proposed legislation to ban discriminatory dress code policies. In Willow Creek, the school board acted swiftly, implementing many of the changes Angela had advocated for. Mrs. Harper's suspension turned into termination, and mandatory anti-bias training became a requirement for all staff members. The district also formed a committee, including parents, students, and teachers, to review and update existing policies to ensure inclusivity. Meanwhile, Angela decided to take her advocacy even further. Drawing on her experience as a pediatrician and advocate, she founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to addressing racial inequities in education. The group provided resources for families navigating similar challenges, offered workshops for educators on cultural competency, and partnered with schools to promote diversity and inclusion. Maya, watching her mom work tirelessly, couldn't help but feel proud. Even though she still struggled with moments of self-doubt, seeing her mom turn their pain into purpose gave her strength. One day, as Angela worked late in her home office, drafting plans for the nonprofit, Maya knocked softly on the door. "Can I come in?" she asked shyly. "Of course," Angela replied, smiling warmly. "What's on your mind?" Maya hesitated for a moment before sitting down across from her mom. "Do you think maybe I could help too? Like with your new group?" Angela's heart swelled with pride. "Absolutely," she said, reaching across the desk to take Maya's hand. "Your voice matters more than anyone else's. This is your journey too, sweetheart." Over the next few weeks, Maya began contributing in small but meaningful ways. She helped design flyers for events, suggested ideas for activities that would engage other kids, and even practiced giving speeches alongside her mom. Though she was still growing her confidence back, Maya found solace in knowing she wasn't alone, and that her story had the power to make a difference. As spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and longer days, Angela organized a community event called Empower Every Child. Held in the park near their home, the gathering featured guest speakers, art displays created by local students, and performances celebrating diverse cultures. Hundreds of people attended, including families from all walks of life. As Angela stood on stage delivering the opening remarks, she glanced down at Maya, who stood beside her clutching a microphone nervously. When it was Maya's turn to speak, the crowd fell silent. For a brief moment she froze, her eyes scanning the sea of faces. Then she remembered her mom's words. "You're brave." Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward. "Hi," she began softly. "My name is Maya, and I'm here because I want every kid to feel proud of who they are. No matter what your hair looks like or what clothes you wear or where you come from, you deserve to be treated with kindness and respect." Applause erupted, filling the park with warmth and energy. Maya beamed, feeling a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in months. For the first time since the incident, she truly believed things could get better, not just for her but for everyone. That night, as they walked home under the stars, Angela wrapped an arm around Maya's shoulders. "How did it feel up there?" she asked. "Good," Maya replied, grinning. "Really good." Angela kissed the top of her head. "You're amazing, you know that?" Maya giggled, leaning into her mom's embrace. Together, They had faced unimaginable pain, but together they had transformed it into hope. And as they looked toward the future, they knew the fight was far from over. But with love, resilience, and unwavering determination, they were ready for whatever came next. Months had passed since the incident that changed everything for Maya and her family. The seasons shifted, bringing cooler air and golden leaves to Willow Creek. Life had settled into a new rhythm, one filled with purpose and resilience. Though, Maya's hair was growing back slowly, soft curls framing her face like a halo of strength. She still carried the memory of that day deep within her. But instead of letting it define her, she chose to rise above it, channeling her pain into something meaningful. The nonprofit Angela had founded, Empower Every Child, had gained momentum far beyond what anyone expected. Schools from neighboring districts reached out, asking for guidance on revising their policies. Teachers attended workshops led by experts in diversity and inclusion, learning how to create classrooms where every student felt seen and valued. Parents formed support groups, sharing stories and strategies for advocating on behalf of their children. And at the heart of it all was Maya, who became an unexpected symbol of courage for kids everywhere. One crisp autumn afternoon, Angela received an invitation that took her breath away, a request for Maya to speak at a statewide youth empowerment conference. The event brought together students, educators, and activists to discuss issues affecting young people today. When Angela showed Maya the letter, her daughter's eyes widened in surprise. "Me? They want me to talk?" "Yes," Angela said, smiling proudly. "Because your voice matters. Because you've been through something hard and come out stronger on the other side. That's powerful, sweetheart." Maya bit her lip, uncertainty flickering across her face. Public speaking still made her nervous, even though she'd grown more confident over the past few months. But then she thought about all the letters they'd received from families touched by their story. She remembered the kids who had told her how much it meant to see someone like them standing up and speaking out. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll do it." Preparation for the speech became a family project. Angela helped Maya write down her thoughts, encouraging her to focus on honesty rather than perfection. Her dad offered tips on pacing and breathing, reminding her to take her time when she spoke. Even Maya's little brother chimed in, cheering her on during practice sessions. By the night before the conference, Maya felt ready, or as ready as she could be. The morning of the event, the auditorium buzzed with excitement. Hundreds of people filled the seats, including parents, teachers, and students of all ages. Maya stood backstage, clutching her notes tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. Angela knelt beside her, squeezing her hand. "You don't have to say anything fancy," she whispered. "Just tell your truth, that's enough." When Maya stepped onto the stage, the spotlight hit her, warm and bright. For a moment she froze, overwhelmed by the size of the crowd. Then she spotted her mom sitting in the front row, giving her an encouraging thumbs up. Taking a deep breath, Maya began. "Hi," she said, her voice trembling slightly at first. "My name is Maya, and I'm 9 years old. A few months ago, something happened to me that I didn't think I'd ever get over. My teacher, well, she shaved my head because she didn't like my hair. At the time, I felt so small, like I didn't matter. Like my hair, something I loved about myself, was wrong." She paused, glancing down at her notes, then looked back, up, meeting the eyes of the audience. "But now I know that wasn't true. There's nothing wrong with my hair, or with being different. What was wrong was how I was treated. And that's why my mom and I decided to fight back, not just for me, but for everyone who deserves to feel proud of who they are." As Maya continued, her voice grew steadier, more confident. She talked about the importance of self-love, about finding strength in tough times, and about using your voice to make a difference. She shared how her mom had taught her that standing up doesn't mean you can't be scared. It means doing it anyway. By the time she finished, the room erupted into applause, cheers echoing off the walls. People wiped tears from their eyes, moved by her bravery and wisdom. Afterward, dozens of attendees lined up to meet Maya, each one eager to thank her or share their own story. A teenage girl hugged her tightly, saying, "You're my hero." An older man shook her hand, his eyes glistening. "Keep going," he told her. "The world needs more people like you." That evening, as they drove home, Maya leaned against the car window, watching the stars twinkle above. "Do you think I did okay?" she asked quietly. "You did better than okay," Angela replied, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "You inspired people, sweetheart. You reminded them that no matter what happens, they can keep moving forward." Maya smiled faintly, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She knew life wouldn't always be easy. There would still be challenges, moments of doubt, and days when the scars of the past felt fresh again. But she also knew she wasn't alone. Her family, her community, and countless strangers rooting for her were proof of that. In the weeks and months that followed, Maya continued to grow, not just physically, as her curls returned thicker and fuller, but emotionally. She learned to embrace her uniqueness, to see it not as a flaw, but as a gift. And she never stopped advocating for others, whether it was helping a classmate stand up to a bully or writing letters to lawmakers urging them to protect students' rights. For Angela, seeing her daughter thrive was the greatest reward. She often reflected on how far they'd come, from that heartbreaking day in the nurse's office to this moment of triumph. It hadn't been easy, but every step had been worth it. Together they had turned pain into power, creating ripples of change that extended far beyond their small town. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Angela wrapped an arm around Maya's shoulders. "You know," she said, "you've taught me something important." "What's that?" Maya asked, tilting her head curiously. "That no matter how dark things seem, there's always light waiting on the other side, if we're brave enough to look for it." Maya thought about that for a moment, then grinned. "Yeah," she said, "and if we don't see it, we can make our own." They laughed, the sound mingling with the rustle of leaves in the cool night breeze. In that moment, surrounded by love and hope, they knew they were unstoppable. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, stronger, wiser, and prouder than ever before.